Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Chodesh Tov. I am Mindy Feldman Hecht, the Interim Executive Director of JOFA, the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. And for those of you who are new to JOFA, we are the main address in the Orthodox community for advocating for the full participation and leadership of Orthodox women in Jewish life. And we are so glad that you are joining us here today. We are living in a fascinating and important moment for our community. Questions about women's roles, inclusion, and leadership in Orthodox life are not new, but what is new is that we have new, fresh, and rigorous data telling us what Orthodox Jews actually think about these questions. That's exactly what we're going to explore today, and I could not be more excited about this conversation with Mark Trencher. A quick note before we dive in, we'll be taking questions throughout. Please feel free to drop them in the chat at any time, and we will do our best to weave them all in. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted online afterwards. It's now my genuine pleasure to introduce our guest today, Mark Trencher. Mark is the founder of Nishma Research, an organization that conducts sociological and marketing research specifically for the Orthodox Jewish community. Mark brings an extraordinary combination of credentials to this work. He is a musmach of the Rabbi Jacob Joseph Rabbinical Seminary, a past president of an Orthodox shul, a day school, and a kashrut organization, and he currently serves on the board of directors of the National Council of Young Israel. Professionally, Mark spent more than 40 years as a business executive, heading research departments at 2 Fortune 200 financial firms, and has taught undergraduate and graduate business stats at 3 universities. He also hosts the Orthonomics podcast, which explores issues of importance in the Orthodox community through the dual lenses of data and informed conversation. Since founding Nishma Research 11 years ago, 2015, Mark has conducted 26 broad studies of the Orthodox community, drawing on a panel of more than 6,000 Orthodox Jews who participate in his research. The report that we are discussing today, Issues of the Day, was published just last month, and it is as timely and relevant as anything I've read in a very long time. Mark's research matters deeply to JOFA right now because it puts data behind what we see every day in our work. JOFA exists to help Orthodox women step into leadership roles in their communities, and this report tells us that the community itself is ready and waiting for that to happen. Mark, thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours. And just to give everyone an idea of the timing, Mark's going to speak for about 25 minutes, then we'll have a discussion, and we will include the Q&A from the audience as well. So go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thank you so much, Mindy. This is great. I appreciate the invitation. The title of the presentation is Women in Leadership. Where does the Orthodox community stand today? And in addition to talking about where we stand today, we're going to do a little bit of history because there has been a striking evolution in views over the last dozen years or so. And in giving this presentation, I'm going to start with the survey I did in 2016 of people who left Orthodoxy. You'll see why that's important. In 2017, I actually approached the leadership of JOFA and asked, have you ever done a survey of your membership? And it turned out they hadn't. So I was delighted to volunteer and to do a survey of the JOFA members, which I'll cover very briefly. They're important. That led to the first survey that was a broad survey of the community, also in 2017. And that survey had a lot of questions dealing with the role of women. So to a large extent, that survey kind of served as the starting point for data that evolved over the last 9 years. And in 2023, we did a follow-up of that survey, and then we did a more recent follow-up in 2026 recently. So there's a lot of data. I've got about 20 slides, so I'll take probably about 1.25 minutes to 1.5 minutes per slide. But don't worry, you can download the entire slide. If you look in the chat box, it's all up there. So you can download it and read it as you see fit. And all of the studies that I've done, Mindy mentioned the 26 studies, they're all available. This is my retirement project. Everything I do is fully transparent. All the studies are available, the questionnaires, the data. In fact, I get calls every now and then from somebody asking me, can I get the data set for this particular survey? And once I take out any names and email addresses and locations, I'm delighted to do that. So the very first survey I did in 2016, you can see the title 2016 Survey of People Who Left Orthodoxy. If there's a box around that title, that it means it'll be the first my first reference to this. I was very intrigued at that time by the media coverage and the memoirs and the anecdotes and the TV shows, the infamous Netflix shows about people who left Orthodoxy. And so I decided to do my first survey on that. There actually had never been a survey done of people who left Orthodoxy, but we were able to get a survey out there, and almost 900 people responded. And the reasons people gave for leaving Orthodoxy were pretty much the same across modern Orthodox and yeshivish and Hasidic men and women. At the very top of the list was I had questions. My questions were not answered. There was no one I could go to get an answer. And over time, I became disillusioned and I lost my belief, my emunah, and eventually I left. There was one group that had a answer that answered that question with even an incident that had a higher percentage, and that was among modern Orthodox women. Now, this was an open-ended question. It wasn't a checkbox. We said to them, what caused your beliefs and practices to change? And they were able to type in that box. 37% for an open-ended response. That's phenomenal. 37% of people wrote in that box something along the lines of, as a woman, I could not face a life of being a second-class citizen or marrying an Orthodox man who would always see me as lesser. You can see it's the sample of the hundreds and hundreds of stories people told. And these were the modern Orthodox women. 37% of them said that this was the reason why they left Orthodoxy. So that was the first time I became aware of the fact that this was a major factor. After this survey was done, I was sitting in the lobby of my shul, chatting with my friend Jeremy Pava. You might know who Jeremy Pava is. We were talking during the Haftorah, so I just want to make that clear. And Jeremy said, that was a really interesting survey. But of course, the members of JOFA are a very specific group. They're people who are already more sensitive, more cognizant, more passionate about the issue. What we need is to do a survey of the broad modern Orthodox community, the entire community in the entire United States, asking not just this question, but a whole series of questions about how they see the role of women. So that was I kind of referred to that as kind of my Pewish survey. It was a Pew survey aimed at the Jewish community, so it was Pewish. And it asked a lot of questions about beliefs and practices. And included in that survey were questions about the role of women. Before I get to that, I just wanted to cover very quickly. In the JOFA survey, it was a fairly long survey, but the question was, is your shul sensitive to women's needs? And you can see here that on the right side, about 40% said that their shul was sensitive, and about 40% said the shul was not sensitive. So, and that number, that 50-50 split is something that we kind of see pretty often in the Orthodox community. One more follow-up before I get to the big follow-up survey. We did have a long series of questions. There were about 20 items on the list, and we asked the question about how important is it to you that your shul provides high intellectual level of women's classes, a women-friendly mechitza. You can see here the top 10 things that people rated. Two observations. One, every time we have asked this question, and we asked it 4 times, the shul the venue providing classes at a high intellectual level for women, and they could be co-ed classes, they could be women's classes, but the key thing is that they want to see classes that are smart, that are intellectual, and that challenge people. That always ends up being number 1 on the list. The other interesting observation, if you look at the column that's called very or somewhat satisfied, you can see they kind of are around 50%. So at that time, this was 9 years ago. These are the things that are important. And about half the people said they're satisfied, and half said they were not so satisfied. So then we did the 2017 survey, which had a much larger sample of about 4,000. And again, we asked, does your shul support the following policies and practices for women? And it's interesting to see, again, religious classes for women on a high intellectual, on an equal intellectual level. Sometimes I said a high level, sometimes equal level. It turns out the numbers are about the same. Being on a high level is equality. Again, over 90% said that. And you can see some of the other things. That by far was number 1 on the list. What I found kind of interesting on this is that when we asked the question, should women be eligible to be a shul president? And if you remember back in 2017, that was an issue. The National Council of Young Israel had it in their bylaws that women could not be shul presidents, and yet there were shuls that had a woman president. My shul, which is a Young Israel, just elected its 5th woman president out of our last 8 presidents, and I believe that this is still on paper in the bylaws of the National Council, but I know for a fact that there has been a decision to kind of ignore it. I mean, it's not an issue. And the 75% here, which is across all of Orthodoxy, said, yeah, there's no reason why women can't be eligible to be a shul president. In fact, if you look at if you look at the groups, not even among the people, even among people who said, I am right, centrist, and the full wording was, they checked off a box that said, I am right, centrist, Orthodox, tending toward yeshivish. That was in the definition. Even among people who checked that box, almost 30% said, I'm fine with the shul with the woman president. These numbers have all gone up, I'm sure, have all gone up over the years. So that was kind of an interesting surprise. Yeah, the question that we thought was most important in this survey, and again we had 4,000 responses, was the question really about women's expanded roles. And the text of the question was, looking at my Orthodox community overall, women should have the opportunity for expanded roles in the clergy. We didn't define clergy much at that time. We defined it in later surveys a little bit better, but we know what we mean. It's not as the admin, it's not as the secretary, it's not as the bookkeeper. It may not even be as a committee chairperson, but it's somebody who reports to the rabbi doing educational programming or whatever the rabbi does. So at that time, and this is again 2017, so 37% of all people agreed fully, yeah, women should have these opportunities. One thing that was interesting is that the difference between men, there was a difference between men and women. Men 30%, women over 40%. A surprise, maybe not a surprise, but not a huge difference. Even among men, it was a plurality of the respondents. It did tie to ages. Among younger women under age 35, a majority said, and not surprisingly, you can see at the bottom that, again, among the different segments of the Orthodox community, it did vary quite a bit. That we see a lot. The roles of women, there are Orthodoxy is very diverse. If you look at Hasidic and Yeshivish versus modern, and even within modern Orthodoxy, if you look at people who say I'm centrist or modern or open Orthodox or liberal modern Orthodox, the Orthodox community is the most diverse within all of Judaism, and the modern Orthodox is the most diverse segment within all of Orthodoxy. So we cover a wide spread of views. So when we later on we'll get to the question about, are some of these views changing? Are they mainstreaming? We have to be careful how we analyze that, and I'll explain how we do that. The other issue, in addition to women having opportunities for expanded roles, is the one of titles. Titles was an issue. The Orthodox Union back in 2017, I don't know if advised is, I'll say advised 5 shuls that had women in clergy level positions, that they did not like their titles. They were told to change their titles. It was interesting. They did not really have a problem with the women in those roles, but they were somehow unhappy about the titles, what they signified. And that kind of went away. So there was a time period when that shuls were given to change their titles. It did not happen, and that issue has not been pursued. So it's like the issue of shul presidency. Somehow over time, there's kind of and I'll say a grudging acceptance, at first at least, a grudging acceptance. It is what it is, and maybe it wasn't a big issue given political issues, etc. So this was the question we asked: is there support for women with expanded roles in the clergy and a title signifying the rabbinic authority? And strong support was about 20%, and somewhat support was about 20%. So when you add them together, it's about 40%. It's not a majority, it's not huge, but I have been told by someone who was aware of what was going on behind the scenes. I've been told that people at the organizations like the OU looked at it and said, you know what? At 40% supporting women having being able to do these jobs and having a title, that's fine. It's not a key issue. In retrospect, it was interesting. In retrospect, I think choosing the words rabbinic authority probably not the best word for a question. I should have said something like clergy related, but the word rabbinic with the RABBI in it maybe triggered people. In fact, had I said something expanded role with the title signifying their authority as members of the clergy function, the numbers probably would have been even higher, and maybe even a majority. So that was kind of a starting point. close to 50%, strong support for women as presidents, an understanding that there are things that women need, that women want, an understanding that the satisfaction levels tend to be about 50, that the glass is very much half empty and half full, and perhaps there was a growing sentiment. We shall see. So then we did a follow-up survey. So Ann Papa came over to me one day. I was out walking with my wife, and she said, we got to do a follow-up survey because it would be interesting to see 6 years later, this is 2023, have the numbers changed? Are more people interested now in women having roles within their shul? So we did this survey in 2023. Again, we called it a profile of the Orthodox community. We embed in these broad surveys a lot of questions of interest, but we include other questions in the surveys as well. And if you look at the surveys online, you'll see questions about what's important to people, what are the issues they think the community must address. We ask questions about their beliefs, about their practices, and a long section of questions about things like this. We were curious to see whether the idea of women being eligible to hold clergy-related types of positions in modern Orthodoxy had gained any traction. That's why we did the survey. And you can see here on the slide, we actually, instead of using the word rabbi or rabbinic type functions or rabbinic type titles, we define clergy-related types of positions as doing things like providing religious guidance, Torah teaching, pastoral care, Yuetzet Halacha. So it was kind of broad. I mean, we didn't get down to the level of officiating at a funeral or stuff like that. But this kind of conveys that this clearly conveys that they're doing things that are part of the clergy function, things that if they were not around, the rabbi would do. So that was our 2023 survey, and the question was, have things changed over the 6 years? So views on women in clergy-related types of positions. So you can see here in 2017. And in 2017. From going from 2017 to 2023, this was a general question. This is the question without the titles part of it. Just what is your view on women being able to do these positions? So in 2017, 37% agreed strongly, and in 2023, 38% agreed strongly. So it's interesting that number kind of didn't change. The heart of the agreement, the people who are most passionate about it, was just under 40%. What's interesting is that in 2017. Only 1 out of 6 agreed somewhat. So the total there was 53%. By 2023, almost 1/3 agreed somewhat. So somehow the issue had gained traction among people who got kind of used to it. And those who agreed strongly were kind of still around 1/3, a little more than 1/3. But those who said, yeah, I can see that's not a bad idea. I tend to agree. That kind of doubled. So in total, the total percentage that agreed went from over half to about 70%. So that was an interesting observation, that the percent that agreed somewhat went up, and that happens with issues in the public sphere. I'll talk about that a little bit more. I mentioned that one of the questions we've asked a number of times is we present a list of issues, and the question we asked here is, how important is it that the overall Orthodox Jewish community pays more attention to these issues over the next 10 years? And every time we ask this, the cost of Jewish education ends up being number 1 on the list. Among men, among women, among younger people, among older people, among people with kids, and among people without kids. It's always number 1 on the list. Now, when we asked this question in 2017, we were a little bit surprised that the problem of agunot was number 2 on the list. This time it was number 3 on the list. The reason being that the issue of dealing with those who commit abuse jumped up a lot, and a lot of that was due to events that were taking place. I won't get into the specifics, but there were cases that were publicized that were horrible. So, but it's interesting that if you look at the 18 top issues, number 2 and number 3 are clearly issues that, well, number 3 always often, they're clearly issues that somewhere between often and very often affect women. And even further down, when we asked at number 14, when we asked how important is it that the community should decide that the community should make decisions on the roles for women, that was towards the middle bottom of the list, but over 40% said, yeah, this is something we need to really think about and come to some decisions in the next 10 years. So that brings us to 2026. I got a phone call from a woman, a professor, a brilliant woman, and she was writing an article for Tradition magazine, and she wanted some updated data. And she said to me, "Gee, is there any updated data on the role of women?" And I said, "You know what? Let's do a survey." So we did a survey. It went out, and we heard back from almost 1,000 people, and we really decided to update the data because we observed from 2017 to 2023 that things were changing. And we were just curious, did they continue to change? Did the level of people who strongly agree, was that still flat, or did that go up? So in this case, we defined women's leadership. We defined women's leadership roles as, we're going to talk about your attitude towards women in shul leadership roles, which are roles that are connected to the clergy function. We said that again, such as teaching, pastoral care, yuetzet halacha, etc. And we clarified, and we are not referring to roles such as a shul officer, board members, committee work, bookkeeping, receptionist, admin, etc. So we basically made it very clear what we're talking about. Again, without using the word rabbi or rabbanit or maharat, which it's the function that was most important. So we did this survey recently. And one of the questions in the survey was, we were interested in, why do people have these feelings? If you have an opinion about something that goes on in your shul, and you're an Orthodox Jew, there must be a halachic basis for that opinion. As you know, I mean, that's the core of what Jofa does, working within halacha. So it's interesting that here, when we asked the question about does halacha affect your views, so top choice, halacha does not allow for women to take any such formal leadership role in shuls. Only 10%, if you look at the right among all modern Orthodox, among 10% said this. The other two choices were, okay, halacha allows for women to take such formal leadership roles as long as they're not given a clergy type of title. And the third choice was halacha allows for women to take such roles in shuls and to have a clergy type title. And those were split 50-50. So 10% said halacha no, but the 90% said yes, halacha allows it. And they were split 50-50 only on the issue of title. So 90% said yes, women should be eligible to have such positions. And it's a 50-50, and half agreed and half disagreed on exactly what title they should have. So that was interesting. And then we repeated I hope you can see this here. So then we repeated the question, do you agree that women in modern Orthodox community should have opportunities to occupy formal leadership roles in shuls? And now by 2026, you can see that among all modern centrist Orthodox, 52% strongly agreed. If you remember, that number had been flat at 37, 38, but between 2023 and 2026, it went over half. 52% agreed strongly, and another 27% agreed somewhat. To me, what was interesting was, if you look at the very bottom row, these are people who, when I asked them, how do you identify within modern Orthodoxy? These are people who check the box saying, I identify as to the right, leaning toward Haredi. And among this group, 20% strongly agreed that women should have these, which I thought, I was expecting it to be like 8% or 10%. So that even among the most right-leaning group, 20% agreed strongly, and 53% tended to agreed overall. So clearly something was going on here. So I mentioned going from 2017 to 2023, the percentage that agreed somewhat went up, but now going from 2023 to 2026, that percentage kind of was flat at around 30%, but what went up was the percentage that agreed strongly. So something is going on here. Over this period, over these 9 years, there was a core that agreed strongly at first. Then initially, a lot of people tended to come on board with agreement of somewhat. And more recently, the percentage that agrees strongly has gone up and is now over half. Okay, so Sylvia Barak Fishman was on the advisory group, and she coined she said this is mainstreaming. It's becoming mainstreaming. I don't know if I try to come up with a slide that conveys what mainstreaming is. But in society, there are issues that over a period of 5 or 10 or 20 years, an example is same-sex marriage, which 20 years ago, the support for it was probably in the low single digits. And now if you look at national surveys, uh, even among people who identify as conservative, and even among a surprising number of Christian evangelicals, there is support. So these kind of issues become mainstream. There's a book I read called The Tipping Point. He describes Gladwell describes the moment of critical mass, the threshold, the boiling point, how things kind of cook for a while and then they boil over and then you have kind of a change. I think we truly have reached a tipping point of sorts on the role of women in Orthodox shuls. But we did ask a few questions. Does your woman have any women in formal leadership roles? And over half of all the people said yes, women do have such leadership positions. Not surprisingly, everything we look at varies widely between the left, which is liberal modern Orthodox or open Orthodox, in the middle, or in the right. People ask me, is the data biased because you're combining all these groups? So what I do is I say, you know what? For a lot of the questions, for a lot of the analysis, what I do is I say, okay, I am going to ignore people who say I'm open Orthodox. I'm going to ignore people who say I'm liberal modern Orthodox. But I'm also going to ignore people who say I'm right-leaning, machmir, or tending toward. Let's look at the group that's in the middle, and let's see how that's changed over time. So you can see here that in the middle of modern centrist Orthodox, 50% said their shul currently has a woman in this role. Okay, we asked two. In my surveys, I ask a lot of open-ended questions. So we asked people, what kinds of shul leadership roles for women do you support? As I mentioned in the beginning, and you can see it in the chat box, this presentation is downloadable, but you can see that interestingly enough, the number one comment that people gave is whatever they can do. Broad support for women in or nearly all leadership roles, including clergy in some segments. A substantial block of respondents, which predominates on the left, favors maximal inclusion. Women should be eligible for essentially every role, often explicitly including rabbinic/clerical leadership, with halacha as the only limiting factor. And you can see some of the examples. So a lot of people said, you know what? We need to tap into them as as knowledgeable, competent, sensitive members of our shul who can provide resources that often are not available elsewhere. So you can see the comments, and in the report, which is available online, you can see a lot of the comments. We also asked a follow-up question. Among those who disagreed, women should have some roles, and it was a small percentage, but you can see the reasons why. The main reasons were halachic. To me, the funniest comment was something along the lines of, right. Whenever women do have such roles, they drive out men's participation. A shul is a man's space, always has been. Men need men's caves. It's a funny comment, but I think it is interesting, and it does not relate to us at all. But there is concern actually in the American conservative Jewish movement that it has become that women have taken strong roles and men have taken less of a role. So that's not an issue in Orthodoxy, but I guess perhaps there was some people felt threatened there. Okay. Finally, we asked the question about, are you satisfied with the leadership roles that shuls provide? Remember, people want it. 70% want such leadership roles. About 50% said their shuls provide it. And are you satisfied that your shul provides such to women educators? And you can see here again, let's look at the middle group. In the middle, people identify in the middle. So 51% said, I am satisfied with the opportunities my shul provides. 27% said not satisfied, 22% said not sure. So the bottom line is, in terms of interest over the last 9 years, the interest in women's having such roles leadership and clergy type leadership has grown from like under 40% to like 70%. Satisfaction is still at 50%. Interest has grown, satisfaction has not gone up that much. It still ranges about 50%. So there's the opportunity. There's a lot of interest, there's a lot of enthusiasm, um, and people are waiting for this to happen. And that is, in a nutshell, the research to date. I am going to be doing another survey. Um, I can't really talk about it because it's in early stages, but it will follow up on some of the issues raised in this survey. And so this is a continuing area of interest. You can see here again on this final slide, you can see this presentation is at the website, at that link, and all of the studies that I've done, all 20, how many are there? 26? There's
26.
a lot of studies. They're all available online at this website. So thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Well, I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to weave in some of your questions, so please keep them coming in from the audience. So the jump in support that you talked about, the mainstreaming that Sylvia referred to 52% overall strongly agreeing that women should have leadership roles. That's a change over the course of 3 years. What do you think is driving that acceleration? Is it a generational change? Is it this post-October 7th moment that we're living in? Something else more broadly? What do you think is driving that change?
Yeah, it is generational to some extent because when we cut the numbers by age, they always go up dramatically. So when an overall number is 50%, it'll be 60% among those under age 35, and it will be lower among people who are old. Not much lower, but it'll be noticeably lower. So it is a generational change. But also, I think it's just as Malcolm Gladwell said, people become comfortable. People become comfortable with a change that at first they were leery about, and then they think about it. I think the other thing that makes people comfortable is the growth of the Yoetzet Halacha. So you have many in the beginning. There were maybe half a dozen or a dozen of these women in community positions that advised other women on issues of nida, taharas hamishpacha. A lot of shuls that have the Yoetzet Halacha share them with other shuls in their community. They are publicized. I mean, our Yoetzet Halacha in my shul is listed on our weekly newsletter with her contact information as a member of the shul's clergy function. I think to some extent people have gone, when you see it and you get comfortable with it and you call her or talk to her or your husband asks you how it went, people get comfortable with it, and yeah, it becomes something that becomes acceptable. And then from acceptable, it could be something that's desirable. So I think that's also a factor.
Mm-hmm. And then, on that issue of title, so, it have been around longer since Maharats or, other, I'm not sure if there are any other titles that came up. So do you think it's a question of, over time people get used to it and, maybe with more time we'll see it? And you talked about how with the title issue, you see a split of almost exactly 50-50 among the people who support the roles themselves, but the title is still kind of that sticking point. So what is it about the title that still, carries so much weight for some people? And do you think you might see an evolution with that over time as well?
I don't know. I think so. I mean, I think we're all aware if we get the Mizrahi magazine, we know that half the people who write in that magazine have a title of Rabbanit. So why is that not just an acceptable title, but an honorific in Israel? And if you use it in a shul in the U.S., people might say we're not into that. So I think to some extent it's cultural. I think it will change. I mean, a title like titles like Maharat have a little bit of very specific baggage in some people's minds because of a source. These women are educated, knowledgeable. They can probably outlearn a lot of men and Daf Yomi and stuff like that. But people feel threatened, so that may change as well. So my expectation is, my hope is that at some point there will be increased acceptance, at least of the Rabbanit title. I think that could happen.
Okay, great. And now I have a question on methodology. So were the people who were surveyed in 2026, were they similarly representative of the whole community? I know you talk about the percentages, but what are kind of like the raw numbers of like, the centrist, right-leaning, open Orthodox? Was it similarly representative of the full spectrum of Orthodoxy in that way?
Okay, so the first thing I will say is the full spectrum of Orthodoxy is a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
So if I ask you the question, what percent, if what percent of people, are you modern slash centrist Orthodox? Yes. Okay. Now, are you liberal modern Orthodox?
Right.
20%. Are you centrist? 40%. There is a bell curve, pretty much. It pretty much stays the same. The largest group is in the middle, and the
Mm-hmm.
middle tends to be modern slash centrist. And
Mm-hmm.
then on the left is a group that identifies either as open Orthodox or as liberal modern Orthodox. And on the right, they identify as right-leaning. It's almost like what you see at the on the dating sites like JDate, where people kind of segment themselves. So it is pretty stable. Therefore, if I was doing a survey like this,
Mm-hmm.
I am careful to balance the sources of information. I get a lot of people responding to my surveys because the RCA sends out emails notices in their newsletter about about surveys, and that's a very broad representation of modern Orthodox rabbis who inform their members.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll send my email. Sometimes I send the survey links to email lists. I might include lists from my Jewish Link, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
centrist right.
Mm-hmm.
In a few cases, I once did a survey for Hatzalah where I actually got 3,000 responses from people who are Haredi,
Mm-hmm.
I got 2,000 responses from people identified as Hasidic, of
Mm-hmm.
which 490 said, I'm Satmar. Yeah, they're Satmar, and they responded to an English language survey.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I do, anytime I talk about the community as a whole, if I say the community as a whole feels this, I balance
Mm-hmm.
the numbers. So in other words, I know, for example, and this might surprise some people, but the modern Orthodox are only about 36% of the entire Orthodox community. The
Mm-hmm.
Hasidic group is a little bit bigger than modern Orthodox. Yeshivish is a little bit smaller. So if I do a survey, if I want to make a statement about the community as a whole, I would balance the groups so that the percentages work out, so that I'm not overrepresenting one group or the other.
Right.
So the surveys are all online. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the age of telephone surveys is pretty much over these days. Even the Pew survey, which was always a phone survey, is an
Mm-hmm.
online survey. I do like to ask a lot of open-ended questions. Sometimes I take a survey online and it's I agree, disagree, check, 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 and I'm waiting for the box where I can tell you what I really think. I like to
Mm-hmm.
include a lot of those boxes because I think what they do is they give people an opportunity to express their feelings. Oh, you're
Mm-hmm.
Jewish. Do you want to hear what I think? Absolutely. These people, and interestingly enough, that's true across all of Orthodoxy, modern, yeshivish,
Mm-hmm.
Hasidic, they're all very open. And when you read those comments from people, you can read them, and it's more than just percentages and checkboxes. You can kind of get a sense of, okay, I get a sense that this person is really being open and honest. And also the surveys are all anonymous,
Mm-hmm.
100% anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling that we're giving people an opportunity by sending them a link that's easy to fill out. They can do it on a computer, they can do it on a smartphone. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, admittedly, the big challenge in the world of survey research is getting a representative response, getting
Right.
getting the community to respond to your survey.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take a question from Mitch. He wrote, with the rapid acceleration of yeshivish orthodoxy as a rising percentage of total orthodoxy, do you see the more open orthodoxy approach becoming further isolated over the next decade, or do you believe it can still be viewed as a branch within the broader Orthodox world? He's saying this as a resident of Northern New Jersey, seeing a lot of children of modern Orthodox families pivoting toward a more black hat fundamentalist approach.
Yeah. So one of the questions we asked several times is, have you changed over the last 5 or 10 years? Have you personally become more observant? And we always see about twice as many people say yes as no. So there is a shift. There is a shift to the right. At the same time, if you read some of the research that people like Rabbi Dr. Zev Elef, probably the number one historian of the Orthodox community, he says it's going in both directions. So yes, you have people who are becoming more observant, and people who I know people who responded to a survey in the past and said they were modern slash centrist Orthodox, and they tell me that this time when they took a similar survey, they checked the box that said yeshivish.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, the liberal modern Orthodox is maybe, I don't think it's shrinking. Maybe it's shrinking a little bit, but it's still a very strong presence. When I asked the question in 2019, I asked the question, do you agree with the statement that modern Orthodoxy has become so diverse that the time has come that we might as well split into separate subgroups?
Hmm.
34% said I agree, but 66% said no, we're going to hold it together.
Hmm.
And you could, in truth, modern Orthodoxy is the biggest big tent in all of Judaism. The big
Hmm.
tent. I mean, the Reform movement is quite homogeneous. You don't see a lot of variety within the Reform movement.
Right.
Conservative used to have a little bit of variety. There was a more traditional thing. Now it's not. It's a shrinking. It's a shrinking group that's much more homogeneous, which is also true of renewal and reconstruction. It's the Orthodox that are most diverse, and within that group, it's the modern Orthodox that are the most diverse. And yet we're holding it together. I mean, I think one of the things that's happened is, I mean, several things have happened. I think clearly what's going on in Israel. When I did a survey in 2024, asking people about their connection, their emotional connection to Israel, and do they feel strongly Zionistic including Hasidim, everybody, including the Satmar Hasidim, who said I'm not Zionist. They said I'm anti-Zionist, but every single one of them, 80% and up said I feel a strong connection, emotional connection to Israel. They are my people. So maybe that to some extent we're holding it together. We're holding it together as a very
Hmm.
heterogeneous, diverse group,
Yeah.
and we talk to each other.
Hmm.
In the survey that I mentioned that I did just a few weeks ago, one of the questions was how important is it that we talk to um, non-Orthodox Jews? And a
Hmm.
strong majority said very important. How important is it that we talk to non-Jewish denominations? Also a strong percentage said very important. So
Hmm.
I think the view that there are segments of the Orthodox community that are insular, yes, they are insulated. They don't watch the same movies or read the same newspapers, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that they don't care. That doesn't mean that they're not knowledgeable about what's going on. That does not mean that they don't feel connected to all Jews. Maybe differently, but yes, there are strong connections. So yes,
Yeah.
there is a move to the right.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know whether that challenges the uh, the left.
Hmm.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's positive overall that there's a
Yeah,
desire to kind of stay together, stay in dialogue, both
yeah.
internally and externally. So I think
I
it's.
think I think liberal modern Orthodoxy provides a home to people who
Mhm.
value both of those things. They value
Mhm.
liberal ideology and they
Mhm.
value Orthodoxy. I should mention when I did a survey in 2019 of Baalei Tshuva, and one of the
Mhm.
questions I asked on the survey was, what things have you held onto from your life before you became observant?
Mhm.
And number one on the list was, interestingly enough, number one on the list was I've held on to a lot of my liberal kind of worldviews and kind of liberal
Mhm.
acceptances more so than others. So that was kind of interesting.
I'll take another question from the audience. Philippa asked if you redid the survey that you started with about reasons why people leave Orthodoxy, where previously one of the number one responses, 22% said that they left because as a woman, they felt excluded. Do you think that might be different now if you redid that survey?
I don't know. I don't think it would be that different. I don't think it would be.
Hmm.
And maybe we will at some point redo that survey.
Hmm.
I don't know.
All right. Okay. I want to ask you a little bit more. You spoke about that you yourself are a board member of the National Council of Young Israel, and you said that the nowadays kind of the National Council has kind of every branch handles it at their own branch level, and you called it I think like a grudging acceptance that women might serve as shul presidents. So do you think that there will ever be kind of like a proactive change, maybe publicizing it instead of, there's a lot of secrecy around it, looking at seeing bylaws, getting a hold of bylaws. Do you think at some point there will be some change within the National Council? And what does it say? The current stance is certainly still progress from where you were 9 years ago, with the data that
Yeah.
you presented. So what do you see in terms of the National Council's role in this and lay leadership?
I can tell you in the 6 years that I've been on the National Council, the issue of women as presidents has never been mentioned at a board meeting, not once.
Well,
It has never been mentioned.
hmm
So I think I don't know if as far as I know, it's still on. I don't remember the bylaws ever being revised in
hmm
that period. And a shul can have its own bylaws,
right.
and I wonder how much a shul's bylaws can deviate from the national council's, but it's just not an issue.
hmm Yeah. Okay. And do you think there will ever be a move towards, sharing that more broadly, or, like
Yeah.
there's like the OU has the women's initiative, and they talk about women as lay leaders as part of the OU's women initiative. So, it's just interesting. I know the National Council is separate from the OU, but in many ways they're, parallel organizations in the same ecosystem. So I'm just curious how the two, might interact and inform each other.
Yeah, I mean that might happen. I mean, the National Council does. We do surveys of all of our 130 branch shuls,
Hmm
and if it comes up as an issue, certainly something we would address. There are many women presidents. My shul had a woman president, and I know that when we had the annual delegates meetings, which have people from all different shuls, she always showed up, and I was very happy. And she chimed in. She was eloquent and persuasive, and I think you and I both know other women presidents of young Israels who were like
hmm
that. Again, I think, and not only did it never come up at a board meeting, but I don't remember ever hearing a single negative comment about that issue at a board meeting. So
hmm Okay.
maybe the next
Definitely
time
progress.
maybe the next time there's a constitutional convention, it'll get
Maybe.
redacted.
So for organizations like Jofa and our allies and partners who are working to expand women's leadership in Orthodox life, what do you think the data suggests about where the most fertile ground is right now for continuing to expand those roles and opportunities?
I think there are amazing women out there who are looking for a position of this type, not necessarily a full-time position,
Hmm
but so I think obviously placement, and I know that's something that Joe is working on.
hmm
Just matching. Maybe a survey of all of the RCA
hmm
shuls, and is this something we can help you with? And you're talking about close to 1,000 rabbis, and even if only 10% say, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a woman help me with some of these things.
hmm
You might find 100 positions that are just waiting for somebody to step forward.
hmm And taking it to the next step. So, what would you most want shul rabbis who belong to the RCA or might be outside the RCA and other lay leaders to take away from these findings? What kind of lessons learned, and next steps for our broader community?
Well, the lessons are that the people are ready. The people
Hmm
are more than ready. They want it. The glass is half full. There are definitely opportunities,
hmm
um, and you should definitely tap into that. And and the acceptance of this has gotten to the level where, okay, will you get some pushback? I don't know. There's always pushback. We had a meeting in my shul on the issue of women dancing with the Torah on Simchas Torah, and I think in the end there was a vote which was something like 91% to 9%. So nothing ever gets 100%. But
hmm
we had a meeting where people spoke about it. And at that meeting, people got comfortable with it. And we had a
hmm
rabbi who said, halachically, this is permitted. It's more than
hmm
permitted because you're going to make people feel included. So, I mean, there's a process. We followed a process to make that happen. Maybe a
hmm
next step is to kind of work with a few rabbis to say, okay, we want to help you think through the process that you might use in your shul to inform people of what's going on out there, to get people comfortable, to hear people, to let everybody express their opinion, and then that will help you move things forward. So
hmm
maybe so that might be something that might be of value.
Yeah, that sounds great. Very wonderful. Yeah, and I think that a lot of the qualitative feedback that you shared in the survey kind of point to that overlap between, kind of hiding behind halacha and, but using it as a way to preserve kind of distinct and traditional gender roles. And hopefully, we'll continue to see a change with that, people wrote like, I don't think halacha supports anything beyond females teaching young children and their issues of tzniut, speaking in front of the shul. And then someone wrote, that everyone needs to know what's right for them. A woman is not meant to be in a position in synagogue. So kind of this like overlap between hiding behind halacha and using the traditional gender roles. But I think the rabbis should know what their community members think. So I think it's an overall positive change for sure, and hopefully we'll continue to see that. Sorry, I'm looking at this last comment that came in. Rabbi friend in Old Line, Modern Orthodox Shchanot get them to accept a female assistant rabbi. Oh, okay, that's definitely positive. Definitely positive. Okay, any other questions from the audience that people have? So.
Yeah, I would just add that over the 11 years that I've been doing this, I've done about a dozen shul surveys where a shul comes to me and they do a survey. And more often than not, one of the issues that spurs that shul survey is let's find out what our members think about a lot of issues, including the role of women, including interactions, including educational classes. But the role of women is more often than not one of the things on the survey. So if somebody in a shul wants to pursue this, one approach might be to do a survey of your members.
Right.
And then that'll give you some information.
Yeah, I think it's a great way. So, and a great resource for everybody to be aware of. So I would love to continue to, understand the community. And especially, I think in many ways, the rabbis are the gatekeepers in their shul in terms of, who else is hired, who else joins the board. So I think that, that's important to build that allyship there to, for the rabbis to understand what their community wants and what's would be helpful for their community. So I think that's an important place to start for sure. All right. Oh, and another follow-up comment. His mother voluntarily runs Rosh Chodesh. Okay, very nice. Good to know. All right. Well, Mark, on behalf of Jofa and everyone here today, thank you so much. This is the kind of rigorous community rooted research that our field really needs. And the fact that you do so much of this work pro bono in your spare retirement time is really a genuine gift to the community and makes it all the more meaningful. And what strikes me most about what we heard today is that the conversation in our community really has shifted. We've seen that mainstreaming, which is very encouraging. The question is no longer whether Orthodox women can and should take on meaningful leadership roles in Jewish life. The data shows us that there's a strong and growing majority of modern Orthodox Jews who already believe that they should. And the conversation now is about how, in what roles, with what recognition, what type of titles, and with what support. Hopefully, we'll continue to see strides in these areas as time goes on. And this is exactly why Jofa recently launched our new Shul Board Lay Leadership Network, which is a network designed to give support, connection, and hands-on tools to women who are serving or hoping to serve in Shul leadership roles. And if today's conversation really resonated with you, this is where you can join us. If you yourself are, a woman serving in your Shul leadership, whether as a board member, president, any other type of leadership role, please share her name, your name, and contact info with us as we build out this network. I'm going to drop a link here in the chat. You can access it through our website, through our newly updated feminist community toolkit. I'm going to drop it in the chat here. So please go ahead and fill that out. And also, as I mentioned, for everyone here today, you can get his full report. So I'm going to drop that here too. And I also added Mark's contact information if you want to be in touch with him directly. Maybe you want to get a survey going for your shul and see if you can, get some change going on the ground. And if today's conversation moved you and you felt connected to this, engaged by this work, I invite you to stay connected to us. You can sign up for our newsletter, donate, sign up to receive the next Jofa Journal in your mailbox, all on jofa.org. And I just want to ask for one last ask before everybody goes, take a moment to complete our short survey so we can, better meet everybody's needs and continue to provide high quality programming for everybody. So that's there in the chat as well. And once again, thank you all for being here. Chodesh Tov. Have a great rest of your day. Meaningful 9 days coming up. And we hope to see all of you at our next event. Thank you so much, everybody.